Thanks for taking the time. Yeah, before we get started, if everybody who can wants to turn on their video, that's helpful.
I'm sorry, but I'm using a different computer and I can't get the video to work, so I'm just going to have to talk.
That's okay. We see your lovely smiling face anyway. You can
well, anyway.
Misty, are we all set, or are we going to take a few minutes?
So I would just wait a couple more minutes. People are still coming in right now.
Sounds good.
It looks like our attendance numbers are pretty high, doesn't it?
Better than we have, so that's good.
Right. I was very excited about that. Hello, Mr. Alcock. How are you?
I'm well. Long time no see.
I know. I saw you in the flesh. That was kind of nice.
Cecily, are you here too? Julia Lynn, I saw you, but I didn't see Cecily. Is she here?
Not yet. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Stanford. Thanks for being here. Good to see everybody's smiling face. We had tornadoes here in Chicago last night. So I hope they aren't coming your way.
Where did they touch down?
Yeah, outside of Chicago. No one died, but there were 5 people taken to the hospital.
What suburbs did it fall down in?
Woodridge and Naperville.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if I'm a little groggy, we were up until like 2 in the basement. So yeah. Kind of exciting weather. I can't wait to be there in person with you in the fall. I'm just going to keep saying that. I can't wait to be in person with you all in the fall. And maybe before, because we should have some roundtable or some co-chair meetings June or July and August, maybe, just to make sure we're on track and communicating.
That's a good idea. I like that idea.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Misty? Should we let her roll?
Yeah, I'll give it until 5:35 and then I'd say go ahead and start.
Awesome. My clock must be fast. I'm at 5:35.
All right. Well, my clock is at 5:35, and I'm our host for this evening to kick us off. So we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mike Alcock, and I'm the volunteer co-chair for Region 3 of Columbus City Schools Facilities Master Planning Process. I'm also joined this evening by fellow co-chair Julia Lynn Walker and student lead for our region, Cecily Wenjama. Our role tonight is to help facilitate the conversation and take you through the agenda of the evening. Please keep your cameras on for the entirety of the meeting. We also ask that you keep your microphones on mute until we get to the discussion breakout room portion of our meeting. But that said, please use the chat function should you have a question, and we will have the other regional volunteers assist in making sure that you're heard. We'll also acknowledge when we don't have an answer that you may be asking in the chat. I'd like to just take a moment and ask everyone to please help us exercise a little bit of grace this evening. Everyone will have an opportunity to voice your opinion. Help us remain positive, as we know that this year has been stressful, and sometimes conversations about facilities and planning for the future can also be stressful. But tonight, we're going to remain positive and constructive. We will acknowledge when we don't have answers right now, and all the questions in the chat will be documented by our student lead, Cecily, or other regional volunteers, and answered by district staff at a later time, and then compiled into an FAQ document, as has been the case for our previous community conversations. This evening, we also have Area Superintendent Dr. Sandy Womack and Columbus City Schools board member Carol Beckerly. Additionally, we have Mike Nicholson from Battelle for Kids and representation from Leggett Architects, who is the planning consultant assisting us in this process. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Area Superintendent Dr. Sandy Womack. If Dr. Womack is here with us this evening.
I'm not sure he is, but I'm
Okay.
happy to step in.
Sure.
and welcome you all. I'm Carol Beckerly. I'm sorry my video isn't working, but I'm one of the board members, and I am assigned to Region 3 happily. I live here, and I am thrilled that so many of you have joined us, and this is incredibly important work, and we are looking forward to continuing it for the next several months and into the fall. I'm trying to remember the time frame. When do we're officially done with this phase? In December, right? Yes, I'm
Correct.
getting nods. Okay, so
Yeah.
you know, we still have some work to do, and again, just want to express our gratitude for all of your participation. Back to.
Thank you very much, Board Member Beckerly. My name is Dennis Pabin. For those of you who may or may not have seen me before, if I have seen you, thank you again for joining us this evening. If I haven't, welcome. You will see a few different folks and faces from our team. We have Robin Randall and Melva Williams-Argao also participating this evening. We have several different members of our team that once we start moving forward with the process, you will be seeing their faces as well from Ferris Planning and AEC. We would like to remind all of you that the website is where you can access all of the current and previous information for all previous community discussions, surveys, conversations, and board reports. So this is sort of the central ground for all of the communication and documentation that have been accumulated over the course of the process so far. This is a live QR code, so if you are interested, you can hold up your device to the screen. If not, the website is there listed below the QR code on the screen. We've been asked a couple of times to synopsize what is the master plan, because sometimes those words can be a little hard to grasp. So we wanted to bulletize just a couple of points of what the goals and ambitions are of the facility master plan. First and foremost, it is to reflect the vision of a portrait of a graduate. This has been something that has been it's been in the works a long time, and now that it is being unveiled, this is a commitment through Columbus City Schools that we want to reflect not only from all standpoints of teaching and learning, but how the facilities can support the vision of what we want these pillars of a portrait graduate to be. It supports academic programs for all grade levels. The master plan aligns utilization and enrollment for all regions. It's to gain consensus on a master plan. That's one of the major portions of this process. That's why we are methodically going through all of these different components and having several of these discussions. So we have everyone has a general understanding of where we've been and where we're going. It's a prioritization of the implementation. This is, as we've all discussed before, this is the biggest district in the state of Ohio. It's a near impossibility to do an entire plan of this scale and scope at one time. You know, you'll see some of the regional suburban districts that they're out on the ballot, they pass and they go. That's 4 or 5 facilities. This is not the case. So a lot of what this will be is a 10 to 12 year outlook of how these facilities will be adjusted. And then together we'll be helping to prioritize what projects are when. And the design and school buildings and furniture selection comes after approval and funding of the master plan. So a lot of what we're talking about is the interpretation of space and the envisioning of space, but the actual space planning and space placement for a school building will be down after the master plan is approved. Something else that we've been asked is, can you show us a quick example? So this slide is from Shaker Heights. Robin and I spent about 6 to 7 months preparing the master plan for Shaker Heights. It's obviously a much smaller scale than Columbus, but you could see that at the bottom, we had 4 concepts that were presented, and we looked at district, I guess in this case, from left to right, top to bottom. What is the plan for each of the buildings? And from a curriculum standpoint, from a facility standpoint, what was the plan? And then you can see in the upper right, the green, yellow, red, that was the consensus. We gave everyone an opportunity to put a sticker on this plan. So they had a chance to, this is something that green is a go, yellow is I like other options better, and red is no way, please don't. So where are we? The define phase is where we start to develop a program. And when we develop a program, what we are doing is, for this particular process, we're reflecting how a program can be a reflection of the vision of a portrait of a graduate. So you can see coming up, we'll have a data report. We still have several meetings that our team and the CCS team has to come together to put a lot of academic data, curriculum data, and enrollment data. And so once we get all of that information, plus all of the input that we've received and feedback we've received from these 3 sessions of community discussion, we're going to have a report out for after the school year starts. And then all of that data will go into the conceptual ideas, the putting concepts to paper. So where did we start? Just a quick recap. The gather phase, we had 2 very important questions where we wanted to start the process. What aspects are successful? And we had a very vast array of feedback. This was the summary of items that were noted in all 6 regional discussions. The full response of all the regions are also available on the website. So if you are curious to see what Region 5 had to say, or Region 3, or all of them, they are all on the website. And then the other aspect of what isn't working. So we really wanted to start at the first point, just where are you? How do you feel? And just get an understanding of the community feedback of where they see their facilities. Step 2, we had the envision phase. The envision phase was, what do we want? Where do we want to go? And reflecting back on the issues that we discussed in the gather presentation, but we used the vision of a portrait of a graduate. And we picked 3 because with the time constraints we have during these community discussions, we didn't want to bog down the conversation. We really wanted to have an understanding and a fruitful conversation of these 3 components. So discussion one, we talked about different, the ideas of adaptability and agility, and how can cafeterias and corridors, just trying to think conceptually of space. And there was again, a vast array of feedback. This is one of the examples for some of the responses that we got for this question. Again, to repeat that the rest of the information provided is all available on the website. We had a second question about the ideas of flexible spaces. And when we think of flexible space, what does it mean? What do we need? And the types of equipment that you'd see in there. And again, here's a summary of some of the responses that we got during those conversations. And then finally, we talked about in looking at global empathy and how a school should be welcoming and how it can have environmental stewardship and what are the aspects. And a lot of outdoor learning was discussed, community gardens and community involvement, especially with the global empathy ideal that the schools need to be an idealistic community center where learning happens, but also community integration happens. Now, here we are at step 3. Robin, take it away.
Thank you, Dennis. So step 3, I think, is even going to be more exciting in terms of the dialogue tonight. We're working on creativity, critical thinking, and technology. And we've invited Mike Nicholson to come and talk a little bit about what each of these mean, and then talk about the science of learning behind that. And then what's fun for tonight is instead of waiting till the end to have the conversation, we're going to break up into groups and talk first about creativity, and then talk about critical thinking, and then talk about technology. So I hope you guys are ready for some fun conversations. Mike, you want to take it from here? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks, Robin. Thank you. Yeah, so the first one is creativity. And as you see there, we have noted that students will be imaginative and explore original ideas and innovative solutions by transcending traditional thoughts, patterns, and relationships. And one thing I think you'll see as a common theme throughout that description is the sense of novelty, original ideas, transcending traditional thoughts. So really trying to apprehend connections that haven't been made before, or other ways of expressing novel notions. So with that, if we switch ahead to the next slide, please. There has been study between how our environment can impact our ability to create, to open up those expansive thoughts, to gather those ideas that might be on the periphery. There's a positive relationship between the openness of the physical space we find ourselves in and the openness our minds tend to go in terms of being creative and finding those new ideas. So with that, you can imagine how the views or the vistas that are available in our whatever space we're in, the ceiling height, or even the openness that's conveyed by the lightness of the color of the walls can affect expansive thinking. So this isn't conjecture. There's been science and empirical evidence that shows that there is a relationship between how expansive the physical places we're in and how expansive our thoughts tend to be in those circumstances. Robin?
So when we first think about creativity, I feel like our traditional view is, oh, that happens in the art room, or that happens in the music room. That's where students are creative. They have a connection with their teacher. The teacher guides them through a creative exercise, and that's where creativity happens. Well, we know that this is really about creative thinking. And so if we think about how can we encourage students put the problem together in a different way, flipping it on its head and encourage those thought processes to be different beyond the walls of the art room or the music room, right? So we want to find those ways to turn things upside down, put the cogs together differently, to assemble the puzzle differently. How does space create that kind of way of thinking? I mean, it's so exciting that the science is the environment affects the way that you think. So let's talk about that and find spaces that really blow the walls away, right? And unleash creativity for you. And it can be a custom thing. I mean, some people are creative on their own. Some people need to associate and be social for creativity. But as Mike said, the science is we need to be able to find those spaces that provoke us and open our minds to thinking differently. So we've got a question for you about creativity. It's thinking about beyond those classrooms, right? We're knocking those walls down. What types of settings inspire you to think creatively? And then also, what will inspire the students? So think about yourself and where you're most creative, and then think about how students can also be inspired to be creative in a space. So we're going to break into, I think, 3 small groups. So we've got great attendance tonight, so thank you for coming. And then we'll pop in and out if you've got questions. Any questions before we go into the group? All right, well, we've got 10 minutes, and I think Misty will give you a warning when we're ready to come back out. So we'll talk to you soon. Looking forward to your report out.
I just want to jump in really quick with a couple of reminders. Thank you, Robin, and thank you, Mike and Dennis. So just as a quick recap before our discussion here. So the purpose tonight is to review the final 3 pillars of the portrait of a graduate. So thinking again about creativity, and then we'll be moving on to critical thinking and technology. As Robin just alluded to, when you received your registration email, you were initially given a breakout room assignment. But because of the group we have tonight, we're actually going to break out into 3 groups. And our breakout group moderator, our room moderator, once she opens those rooms, she's going to manually assign you to those rooms. Remember the room that you're in, because it will be the same room you return to for breakout discussions 2 and then 3 at the end of the meeting. So just remember that breakout room assignment. And then I just want to reiterate one more time, for this first breakout room discussion, the question that we're focusing on is thinking beyond classrooms. What types of settings inspire you to think creatively? Each room, if possible, should have a champion who makes sure that everyone has an equitable opportunity to contribute. Each room should have a scribe to take notes and fill out the Google form, which was also included in your registration. And each room should have a reporter, because when we are done with each breakout session, we'll come back and report out to the group. So assign those 3 roles right off the bat when you are assigned to your room. Misty, with that, I'll leave it to you.
All right, if you guys just sit tight, I will be assigning your rooms now.
Nice work, Mike. Misty, I know, I think she's still here. It looks like she put us on a 30-minute time slot, so I'll text her.
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
We'll close it down at 10.
Okay, perfect.
Is Marzita by herself in the Spanish room 4?
So she is the ESL interpreter, and I believe
Okay.
the person they were on, so I think they may have gotten kicked off. So as soon as they get joined back in, we'll add the person with her into that room with her.
All right, I'm going back into the room because I was in there and there was nobody in there.
Yeah, I think because they were on earlier, they
Okay.
must have gotten kicked off. Do you want me to add you to a different room or wait and to see if she joins?
No, I'm just gonna, because I have sent her a note that I was in room 3 because I was the initial room. But
It
I'll
looks
send-
like I just got him back, so let me
Okay, just send them to the Spanish room. I'm on my
Okay.
way.
just send him.
Great attendance tonight. I'm just gonna, Mike's in room 1. I'm gonna jump into room 2 and just check in, make sure everybody's feeling comfortable. Any feedback so far, Dr. Stanford?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I just asked if you had any feedback for us so far.
I don't know what's going on with my computer, but I missed a good portion
Oh,
because
darn.
it kicked me off. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give any feedback on the first part. So hopefully I'll stay connected.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And I know Misty's going to be working with this, but we really appreciate your feedback, and we're going to try and restructure our summer so that we get a little more direct communication. I was talking to Mike today, and he was sharing that, you know, you guys were texting and had a lot of interaction. So we would appreciate that same relationship.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. Like right now I'm getting a lot of delay and the volume is really low. I'm not sure what's going on with my computer.
Is it with all of us, or is it just some of us?
No, with everything, yeah. I mean,
Oh, okay.
it froze up on me and then it eventually kicked me off.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. I'm going to jump back into room 2 then.
okay.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're just going to take a few moments now to go through each breakout group and have your reporter give a 1 to 2 minute report to the entire group about your conversation. Please try to keep to that time if possible so that we can stay on track time-wise for this evening. So I'm going to go in order, and I'm going to start with group number 1, breakout room number 1.
Okay, I think that was us.
Okay.
So there was a lot of agreement about being in nature, being outside, wide open spaces, lots of windows, lots of light. You know, we one of our members, and actually probably more than one, preferred the ocean, although that's not accessible here in Central Ohio. Smells and sounds was also mentioned, which is important. Soothing sounds, I'm sure nature sounds, but I would think in terms of the facilities implication, the capacity to deliver those sounds through sound systems that are effective and that it's facilitated, easy for the teacher. And I can say that because I was a teacher and I used to, listen to music, but it was a little makeshift on my part, but that's also other people, younger people are better with technology than me too. Color, bright lighting, all of those things were mentioned. The idea of being immersed came up in terms of, immersed in, I think sort of like a scene or an image or something we were talking about. The nationwide atrium was mentioned as a place that inspires creativity. You walk in and you don't even realize you're outside because there's so much light and green and, plants and trees and things. So there's and it's true, I've only been there once or twice, but it really does energize you. So those sorts of spaces. And we clearly were in agreement that the lack of that does have an impact, because one of our members was talking about having gone to high school in a building that was made in the 70s, and it felt very close and it wasn't conducive to light, and that really does make a difference. And then just my 2 cents, having done a virtual reality thing at the AMC yesterday for Father's Day, it occurs to me that there's probably a way to allow students to access their creativity through that as well, and buildings that have that sort of technology available in a way that can be integrated into the classroom, as opposed to the teachers having to construct it somehow. I mean, thought ahead so that's really smooth, like a virtual lab where you can go sit and pretend not pretend, but experience the ocean while you're writing an essay or something. All right, am I under 2 minutes? I'm close.
You're all set. Thank you so much, Carol. Room 2.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Reyes. I work with Columbus Metropolitan Library, and I'm the reporter for the group. We had very similar to the first group, where we talked about, being inspired to be creative by nature, being outside. We talked about art, bringing art into the buildings. Museums can be a very, place to inspire creativity. We talked about, for schools that don't have the space to be, having classes rooms go outside, what does that mean for those buildings, and how can the buildings be changed to kind of, bring in more natural lighting and make the building feel more like you could be out, like you could feel like you're outside, even if we don't have the spacing for outside, especially with a lot of schools being in the city. As opposed to for the students when they're in the schools, how they could feel creatively inspired. We talked a lot about making sure they feel comfortable, like they feel like the space is theirs for them to be able to use the things in those spaces, that they feel like they can create and, fail and try again and, learn from those mistakes. And I think one of our members brought up COSI and just how they have a lot of interactive things and how that building looks. So I thought that was a really good example of, what we can bring into our schools. And I think that's everything.
Awesome. Thank you, Maya. All right, and group 3, room number 3. And I believe Christine did pop some notes into the chat, which I really appreciate the detail. Would you be able to just briefly highlight a few of the discussion points?
Yes, in fact, Darlene was our scribe and she put this in so that I could kind of note on them. And so basically what we've got, which you can see in the chat, is similar to what the other two groups were saying. The open spaces, definitely the landscaping, having windows to allow for the outside to come in, having multiple forms of stimuli, organized in a way to foster creativity, like having music going and artwork in the room. Hands-on projects. I know people have mentioned that, working with the hands and actually doing physically active work. A space that's emotionally safe. It was mentioned that having the freedom to allow your mind to wander and come up with ideas without the fear of ridicule, and creating spaces that, even if they're not open, appear more open through the windows and the other arrangement of things to make give that appearance and the feel of an open space. That's pretty much, I know that's a repeat of what some of the other groups have been saying, but I think we're all in agreement with a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Carol, I echo your sentiments about centering what helps students feel emotionally safe. That was a common theme that I heard through each group. So we really appreciate the feedback. I also want to say it's helpful to have examples. I know the Nationwide Atrium and COSI were both mentioned. It's very helpful for us as committee members to have physical examples to use as a model. So I appreciate you sharing that as well. Breakout room.
Interrupt for a second just to say,
Yep.
and the emotionally safe thing is really important for obvious reasons, but also it ties into our strategic plan because we're centering on the whole child. And part of that goes into having serious or being very intentional and committed to addressing trauma. And so buildings that are really, thoughtful about making children feel emotional safe will be aligned with and facilitate that overall goal. So I like it a lot.
Can I say one more thing too? Because as we were talking about the creativity aspect, specifically, I teach 5th grade, and what I found is that that is the most difficult thing for me to get them to do, is to be creative, because they just want me to tell them exactly what to do and exactly how to say it and exactly how to write it and exactly what to think. Now, that works in some respects for math, but I do reading and writing with them, and I keep trying to tell them there's a lot of opinions that are out there. There's not always just one right answer. And my goal is to get them to think and to discuss things and to see what everybody's opinions are, and then to come up with their own opinions. But that's really difficult for them to do. So I think we have to start at a really early age of trying to get them in the habit of thinking creatively, so that it's not, they're not thinking that there's just, I have to do it this way and you need to tell me what that way is so that I can do it right. That's where I struggle a lot with my students. So that's a really important aspect of this, I think.
Thank you, Christine. That's a really invaluable insight. So I appreciate you sharing. And I also wanted to say thank you to Dante for your comment. Very happy to see you here tonight, and I'm glad you're part of these discussions. Not to cut off our last group though, breakout room 4. Maritza, do you have something to share?
Yeah. Well, we were very brief, and basically what she was saying, that maybe too much openness for little kids, depending on the age group, then you would think of how to put a lot of things, because too many things will be too much of a distraction. Like, for example, like the whole open window concept. If there's a lot of commotion outside, like the little ones will be too distracted to get inspired to create. They would just wander around. As for the older kids, she also said, you know, the less they have, the more focused they can be. So her opinion was a little bit different as far as not having too much distractive things as pictures and too much of an open concept for it to be a distraction.
Interesting. Great. I'm glad we're getting some diverse viewpoints on these concepts. This is wonderful. Thank you. All right. With that, let's see. I believe I am turning it over. Well, before I do, I know we don't have Lavina here tonight as our family ambassador. She couldn't be here. Misty or Julia Lynn, did you see anything else in the Google form that is notable or that you'd like to share with the group before we move on?
There are 2 points that I would be interested in making, and they weren't necessarily in the Google form, but they stem from it. And number one, I was able to visit 2 of the groups, and people talked about really being able to be creative when they were doing something else. And when we think about that in a classroom setting, if the teacher says stay on task, but the student says, well, I can think about what I need to do if I'm doing something else, we have to be able to balance that. And then 2, people talked about different learning styles. So if you have a classroom and you've got, you know, there are 4 main learning styles and you've got your different groups scattered around, then the teacher needs to be able to facilitate each group being able to access the information emotionally comfortable as most appropriate for them. So that's just what I got from the different remarks that were made.
Thank you. All right, well, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike Nicholson from Battelle for Kids for our second pillar.
Thanks, Mike. And the second pillar, let's see where we are here. I know it's critical thinking. There we go. Okay. And I think one thing you guys might observe or recognize as we go through this is some of these things, they're not mutually exclusive. These things tend to be related or build on each other because in general, we're talking about higher cognitions with this 21st century learning with the Portrait of Graduate Competencies. It moves beyond just recall. So these things are going to have some certain similarities and characteristics and descriptions. But critical thinking, as we have it written here, oh, I'm sorry, can you go back there? Thank you. Our students will analyze and apply evidence-based reasoning to understand big picture challenges. So you can see big picture, you're making connections there, and how solutions affect other parts of the system. So it's being cognitive or cognizant of many or several moving parts and how they're connected. Let's move on to the next part, please. So critical thinking, not unlike creativity, and we've seen some of these references, implies risk-taking in the form of challenging prior learning and challenging tacit assumptions, considering opposing views, and stretching capacities to learning new skills and information. The physical spaces should provide support and cognitive safety. So there we see that emotional and psychological safety for students and educator risk-taking, especially as we consider this has a lot to do with pushing capacities, looking for new connections, challenging old assumptions. And in many ways, we're trying to expand our existing capacity, and that takes risk-taking. Critical thinking can require maximum cognitive effort. Daniel Pink talks about this if you read his book, When, The Science of Timing. He says that the majority of people out there, from what the scholarship says, the majority of people out there tend to do their best thinking when they're freshest. And he talked about their best thinking, their most demanding thinking, the critical thinking, the analysis, and so forth. Physical spaces should accommodate the varied ways that people, students and educators, what their favorite conditions to the extent possible is for critical thinking. We may have different supports we look for, different conditions we look for when we need to do our most demanding thinking. How could our facilities help support maybe some variation in what it takes for different people to do their best thinking? Who do I turn, Mike, who do I turn this back over to now?
That's me.
Robin.
Robin.
Yeah. So again, traditionally, critical thinking has been thought about in a lab condition where we're doing scientific thinking or we're doing problem solving. And, you know, that's usually a small group together, and that's certainly a way of thinking about critical thinking, but we want to expand on that. And we know that connecting dissimilar things. So when you're sitting in a room, we want to be able to connect to different things that you may not have connected before. And that's through technology and books and spontaneous learning as you pass people in the hallway and you say, wait a second, I've got a question. I want to ask that question. So that's the systems thinking, and it's really turning the page on dissimilar things and connecting them in a new way. And what that space can look like is a lot like the future of an office space. So these are the kind of spaces that the people that graduate from high school and college are working in, and we want to bring those spaces to the high schools and the middle schools and the elementary schools where the kids can collaborate. There's still individual learning happening, but there's different scales to it. And you can test your theories with your colleagues and bounce ideas off. If you're comfortable and you feel like that you're valued, your opinion is valued. So having a space like this that values the opinion and allows for that creativity and critical thinking. So we're going to move to a question. Part of critical thinking is to challenge previous assumptions and connect unlike ideas. What are the characteristics of spaces needed to support critical thinking? Mike?
Actually, Robin, I'm going to take over at this point. And so now as you go into this breakout session, we are focusing, as Robin and Dennis have discussed now, on the pillar of critical thinking. Think about what you just heard, the ideas that were presented. Now, how can we now support this pillar with space in our school facilities? How would these spaces work? What types of spaces would encourage our students to analyze and apply evidence-based reasoning to understand big picture challenges, and how would these solutions affect other parts of the system? The specific question you'll be answering now is, what are the characteristics of spaces needed to support critical thinking? We have our previously identified groups, and now our Zoom moderator will organize us into the same breakout rooms for a more intimate, focused conversation. Please select the room that you were previously in when the options pop up. After 10 minutes, we will come back together, and then there will be a report out to the group at large, just as we did for the first session. Please use the same scribe that was identified earlier. And if you are the scribe, please ensure that you fill out the Google form and submit the responses. With that, you can now go into your breakout rooms. I forgot to unmute. Is everyone back now? Okay. All right, well then let's have the report outs. And actually, let's start from the bottom and start with group 4.
Would that be the Spanish group?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So in talking to my parent, she likes the office space concept. As long as there's enough ample space for each student, meaning when they're going to be in groups, that they should have their enough space for them to have their own laptops, and also the ability to have like a notepad if they're taking notes. She also hit temperature control. She thinks that if the temperature is the right setting, the student is able to think effectively. If it's too hot, they might get sleepy. If it's too cold, they might get too distracted. So having the right temperature control in the room will be something that will help them think better. Also having easy access to their tools and requirements of use in the classroom. You know, having a section where when they come into the classroom, either all their laptops are there, all their notepads or everything is organized so they know exactly where to go to, not wasting too much time. They go there, pick up their stuff, sit down. She also liked the group settings of them getting into groups and talking about, you know, what they're working on, whatever topic or project they're working on, but also coming together as a bigger group so that they can share ideas and bounce off of each other. That's about it for us.
Good, thank you very much. Group 3.
Oh, you're muted.
I'm still muted.
Okay.
No, group 3.
So again, Darlene has posted ours in there, so I'll just kind of hit the highlights. Basically, we were all in agreement in that the room arrangements needed to allow for flexibility. Flexibility in that you could have open whole class discussions and yet still have spaces established where students could work either independently or in small groups. And that the arrangement of the seating and furniture needed to allow for easy transitions from one type of activity to another. And that allows for, you know, we had talked about how some students are outgoing and very willing to voice their opinions, where others are shy or like to work on their own. And so a space where, you know, after the discussions have taken place and questions have been asked and answered, that students could go and have the choice of working on their own to complete a task or working with others because they need help or like to have conversations about the topics. But just having that flexibility to do the work and easily the transition from whole group discussions to individual and small group activities.
Hey, Julie Lynn, can I ask Christine something?
Absolutely.
Christine, I take it that if I heard you correctly, you're a current teacher in the district. Is that right?
I am, yes.
So when you hear these ideas, these varied ideas, what's your reaction as a teacher trying to envision a facility that supports that? Placing yourself in there.
As a teacher, I would love it. But I also realize that not every teacher is on the same page with it. I like the idea of having, you know, like choice boards for students to choose how they, you know, do their work. Having the opportunity for them to choose their own topics, having the opportunity for them to have input into what we're doing in the classroom for that year. So I love the idea of having a flexible classroom where, you know, and I have found that a lot of students get a good deal of their knowledge through our class discussions where they'll ask questions and hear answers. And so even though there are some that never will raise their hand and ask a question, they have the benefit of that open discussion. And I allow students, if they choose to work on their own, to work on their own, and allow the other students to work together in groups of 2 or 3 or 4, so long as they're doing their work. So I love that, if we could have a classroom that enables that a little more than like the straight seating that we have. I'm constantly moving desks around, and the desks don't really allow for that, as well as, more flexible seating would. So
Okay.
that idea I would love.
That helps me. Thank you. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Group 2.
Hi, everybody again. We actually, Christine and Mike, we started to talk about that towards the very end of our breakout session, about how teachers would adapt to this new mindset and these new kinds of spaces. So we didn't fully get into that, but I'm glad it got brought up here. Flexibility was the main word, I think, for our group as well. We talked about, having a wall that's a whiteboard that everyone can contribute to and put ideas on and work together on, movable, flexible furniture, moving away from more rigid furniture that's uncomfortable for students, because we thought that led back to our last conversation about creativity. If you're not comfortable, you can't create, you can't get into critical thinking. Being able to explore the space that they're in, having resources and equipment that would help with analyzing and, exploring together. And also a lot about students learning different learning styles and how some may want to work in groups, some may want to work on their own, and how can we have those spaces in the movable areas be able to kind of go back and forth a little bit. And then, and I think we ended with talking about, the teacher's mindset and how, how will they be able to adapt, the training that they'll need to kind of adapt to these new spaces when they have it, because it'll be new for them and the students.
Great, Maya. Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments for group 2? Then group 1.
Very much echoing everything that's been said before. Kids being able to move about, the idea of exploring stations so that the child can migrate toward a modality. The example we used was, there's different ways to solve a math problem if you've got manipulables and so, or manipulatives, and giving them that choice so they can kind of go where their interest or their problem solving is taking them, to facilitate that thinking. And that flexibility was both in terms of modalities and different ways of solving the same problem, but also in terms of sitting, standing, on the floor, kind of a matrix of different ways that they can have choice. And the same idea, it was already mentioned, sometimes you work alone, sometimes you're social, have flexibility between that, understanding that critical thinking can take place in all those different, or in those different venues. Then there were some other things that were a little different in terms of almost like creating a philosophy of critical thinking in the building. One of our members mentioned years ago, you used to be able to go into COSI and you stick your arm in a bag or something and feel something and you couldn't see it and you had to think about what it was, like that sort of, you think it's a vein or somebody's, I can remember doing this on Halloween, it was spaghetti and, somebody would tell you, oh, it's somebody's vein, like that sort of, connecting, expansive thinking, but having that sort of be a mainstay of the building, or like elusive art, where you look at it 1 minute, it's an old lady, the next minute it's a flower or something, but have that sort of almost like embedded into the culture of the building. Like, all right, so if you say to someone, think critically, like think about that picture on the wall where you have the old lady, but it's really a man smoking a pipe or a witch or whatever it is, or a beautiful woman versus a witch. You guys all know that one. Helping with the diversity. The idea of always just having beautiful things like artwork and things that just inspire, and don't underestimate the importance of that in nature. I know, I don't know where it is, but someone else shared that they'd worked in a school building at one point where they had a Post-it wall of like question of the day and questions the kids could ask. And the Post-its built up over the years, like they didn't take it down. So it became like a wall that reflected all the thoughts and questions of the kids throughout the year. Maybe it was for the month, I don't know, but, and then another wall that had to do with putting up your emotions. So that if you were having a bad day or, if you had a question, you'd say, take it to the wall. And these are all very trauma informed and restorative justice like practices. But what was really cool about our conversation was the thought of, if we're serious as a district and wanting to embed that into who we are and our culture, and one of our 5-year strategic plans is that we must focus on the whole child. And inherent in that is trauma-informed practices and restorative justice. How cool to embed something like that in the building, like in the foundation of the building. Like this is our culture and there's our wall. And so, it's not so much that it's anything you couldn't do without it, but it would be a real testament to how serious we are as a community to really integrate those practices.
I'm just going to interject the philosophy of building being a tool of teaching is one that's very strong in terms of how can it provoke learning and also encourage it, but make it fun, make it just a sense of discovery. It's almost like going to a museum, a fun museum.
Right. And and I think that's all true. The other thought about some of this sort of social emotional stuff is that we have a culture problem in terms of saying we're doing stuff and then really implementing with fidelity. I'm just going to keep it real, and I'm sure some people are nodding either internally or actually. So it's important for us as a board, as a district leadership, all the way down to, custodians and grounds people to understand or to signal that we're serious about this. And what a better way to do it. There's not a better way than to actually embed it in the building. Like we're so serious about SEL and attending to the whole child that we have these sorts of structures that are part of it. So anyway, I'll stop talking because I talk too much, but it's pretty exciting stuff. Very exciting stuff.
There's a classic example of the visitor to Cape Canaveral who came upon a janitor in the hallway and said, oh, what are you doing? Expecting the man to say, I'm waxing or cleaning. And the janitor looked up in all seriousness and said, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. And so, yes, that is, so I just wanted to emphasize, yes, that is where we have to get to. But let me now check with my co-chair to see if there's anything else that he observed that should be shared with the group before we move on to the last pillar. Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Just quickly, there was a comment in room 2 that stuck with me. Someone talked about, the question prompted for what are the big picture spaces, but this person mentioned the benefit and the boon of having small private spaces, right? Being in an office during the day. I'm sure everyone can relate to needing to shut the door sometimes to sort of tune things out. And if you think about it, many students never get to experience that, right? At home, if they have jobs, right, they're probably constantly surrounded by people. School might be one of the few places, maybe the only place where the potential for that to happen exists. So I think it's important not to lose sight of those spaces as well. I thought that comment was right on.
Great, thank you. So now we'll go back to Mike Nicholson and hear about the pillar of technology. Dennis, sorry.
Sure. So technology, just as a grounding here, our students will leverage traditional emerging technology to consume, create, communicate. Again, you're going to see some overlap here, and connect while practicing responsible citizenship in an increasingly digital world. A comment or two about this. So if you flip to the next slide, please. So one thing we know about technology and the challenge that's inherent to it is that technology is continuing to evolve at an ever accelerating pace. So that presents two challenges for the physical space. Is how do we allow for our infrastructure to accommodate increasingly rapid changes in the technology resources? So how can our facilities keep pace? And then with that is, how do we allow our kids constant and easy access to this tool? How can our space provide for both of those realities with technology? That's ever evolving. So how do we keep up with it? And how do we allow our kids easy access to that technology? So back over to, is it Robin?
Thanks, Mike. I agree that technology is here. And what we're doing with technology in the classroom is sometimes setting up the classroom the same way we've done for a century and just putting the technology in the hands of the student. Now, during COVID, we know that technology saved us. That's how we learned, was through technology. So we know that that's something that's here to stay, but we want to mix it up with the classroom. We don't want these traditional stage on the stage, the line of the classroom, the desks crammed in there, so there's no flexibility. While their technology is in the front and it's also in the hands of the students, we want to create space that supports technology and inspires us. So if we think about where we are, we've even got infants that are using their mom's phone while they're going through the grocery, right? Every child knows how to turn on technology. They know how to select what they need. And it's also eliminating boundaries for all the other pillars. So critical thinking and creativity, you can access the information immediately and ask a question and get an answer. So we want these kids to just feel the unlimitedness of technology and use it as a tool. Don't get distracted by it. We need guidance on how to use it, but we want it to be a tool for exploring all the other pillars of the portrait of graduate. So lastly, this is what Google looks like today. It's not the future of office space, it's now. And so imagine what students will be looking at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. And how do we bring this and the business model of people that are using the technology into the schools with the career tech programs, emerging that to pre-K all the way up through 12th grade. So imagine what you will about the future of technology, and let's imagine together. So here's the question. Given the fast pace of technological change, how can we plan spaces to accommodate this fast-paced change? Is it Mike or Julianne?
Thank you, Robin. Now, think about this presentation as we look at the pillar of technology. How can we support this pillar with space in our school facilities? How would these spaces work? What types of spaces specifically would encourage our students to leverage traditional and emerging technology to consume, create, communicate, and connect? To consume, create, communicate, and connect while practicing responsible citizenship in an increasingly digital world. So again, given the fast pace of technological change, how can we plan spaces to accommodate this fast-paced change? With that, we will go back to the same breakout rooms with the assistance of our Zoom moderator for this smaller conversation. Again, please stay in the same room you were previously. After 10 minutes, we will come back together and report to the group at large. Please use the same scribe and complete the Google form as was done previously. With that, you can now go to your breakout rooms and we'll look to hear your responses when you come back to the large room.
My Wi-Fi died. Can somebody put me back in room 3 again?
All right, it seems as if most people are back. So we will now look at our report backs and see what you discussed in your sessions. So let's start with group 2. What were your thoughts?
So I'll report out for group 2. This is Dr. John Stegall. By the way, I'm also a leadership intern with the district. I was a champion this past year. And so we talked about a lot about both current needs and anticipating our future needs. So one of the examples that came up that was discussed was, I think probably everybody here can think about a building. If you know enough about the building architecture, if you're familiar with it, you kind of know what time it was built. So we look at some of our buildings in the district or maybe in another district where you're from, you notice the building's closed off and it's got a very few windows in it. You know, it was probably built during the energy conservation period of the 1970s and early 80s, back when that was a thing. They built those buildings thinking that was a great idea. And at that time it seemed like one, but we know buildings are no longer built that way. And so now we have to think about, you know, not just building for that particular time, but we have to anticipate our future needs. And so to say that is if we build a building for 2021, in 2021, it's already going to be outdated by the time it's finished. So we really need to be thinking about, as a group, we discuss how we really need to be anticipating our future needs, you know, both in terms of technology, as we know it's going to involve the forecasts and everything. And then for surprises, there's going to be breakthroughs that we don't even know about. We even talked about like some of the things, you look at Iron Man, Tony Stark, some of his holographic imaging, things like that. I mean, there's things like that that are in the works right now. It may not be exactly the same way, but like anticipating how are those kinds of things going to come into education? There's innovations and breakthroughs we don't even know yet. So just basically, you know, in not building our buildings, not locking it in so much around one particular instructional type of approach or strategy or need, maybe focusing on some of these things, but also looking at like, how is this going to grow? How is this going to evolve? Don't build it for one particular thing, element in time, but anticipate those future needs. In addition to that, we also talked about there may be some need, I mean, very likely there's going to be a need to look at how we can continue to build again. And I mean, we're gonna have to go back and retrofit our buildings after a certain period of time because we know technology is going to continue to evolve. Some examples came up of both the Ohio State University. Ohio State right now is working on like various quadrants of its buildings. They'll go through, renovate those, they'll move on to the next one, then they'll move on to the next one after that. And they just like keep the cycle going. It's the same thing with grocery stores. Grocery stores are always updating. We can't build our buildings just for one particular round and just say, okay, that's it for another 50 years. We have to be already planning, and that may be a level above what we're considering right now in CCS, but I think that's going to be part of the, policy negotiation and other process that goes into it, that we have to be planning for the next cycle after this one already. Maybe it's in such a way where it comes a little bit sooner, but also factors in those upgrades. It factors in, okay, 15 years out, our buildings may already be out of date. So how are we going to go back in and retrofit them for where the technology is at that point in time? So basically, again, thinking about our current needs and then also anticipating our future needs and being flexible for those.
Good. All right. Thank you very much. Group 4.
This was a little bit harder for the parent that I am with. But mainly what she hit on was for the students to have accessibility as far as Wi-Fi. Making sure that it's not, since the whole school is going to be serviced, that there's no crashing all the time and they're able to, connect constantly. Not only that, like if they're able, like when school starts, they get assigned to a laptop, that they can take that as taking over a place of their regular notebooks, that they can use it, get it assigned at the beginning of the school year and use it throughout the school year, take it home, bring it back, as if they were taking a book, a science book or a math book home. This way they have a way to organize their all their work in one designated area in the laptop versus folders and other notebooks. Those are the things that she talked about.
Okay, thank you very much. Group 1.
Sorry, I'm here. I just took a minute to unmute. We talked about a lot of the same things that the other groups have brought up, the need to be adaptable because we don't know what's coming down the pike in terms of technological developments. I had some like really cool thoughts about ideas like, holograms and inspirational thinking, kiosks where students can, log into, make SEL, counselor meetings or schedule a tutor or, I'm not even sure that we really knew what all the capability could be, but the idea that there are interfaces and kiosks that are accessible to the students to get their needs met, and that are accessible and, user-friendly kind of things and efficient. Just that some of those ideas were pretty cool. One of our members talked a lot about adaptability and how businesses address these things through not having fixed walls, floating floors, drop ceilings, screens everywhere so that we can, project and not screens everywhere, but screens accessible. The wiring and other things structured in such a way so that those things can be flexible too, movable walls, cable management. And then we talked about, how that has to be something that we anticipate having to upgrade and take care of during the life cycle, which was also mentioned by one of the other groups. One thing I forgot to mention on the critical thinking thing, but it came in here too with movable walls. Sort of the idea that, building into the idea of critical thinking that a wall can move or a floor can float or things like that, to encourage the kids to not have, their thinking bound by what is, in a way that using the buildings to facilitate that, well, there's a wall there. Now there isn't a wall there, there doesn't have to be, just integrating the building into the instruction in ways like that seem kind of cool.
Good. Thank you very much. All right, let me just check with my co-chair. Do you have anything that you'd like to add from something you saw or heard?
Yeah, someone in group 3 mentioned the issue of funding, and that cycles of change in terms of buildings and facilities come and go, but access to funds to adapt what you have is critical. So I think that's a part of this discussion that we're not necessarily focused on with our committee, but it is a part of this process, and it will be a part of this process always. So just making sure that we're adaptable and nimble in how we're providing our educators and our students with funds to grow from what we already have, no matter what building we're in.
All right, thank you, Mike. Does anyone have any last minute thoughts or questions or comments that they'd like to contribute from any of the groups?
I do actually. If anyone else was and I was really hoping that Mr. Womack and Ms. Meeks was here because I'm familiar with both of them. I am not going to return to Columbus City Schools as an employee. Reason being is, for me, I'm an instructional assistant. And sometimes I find myself much more focused on attempting to fix things that are given to me, such as the curriculum or the way things should be done, and not having as much time to engage with the children in a creative way. And with that being said, I've been able to go to different districts, such as Grandview Heights and Upper Arlington and different parts of Ohio, and use my actual skill sets. As an employee of Columbus City Schools, I do not get to use any of my skill sets. And it's not directed towards any school or any person. I genuinely feel that the system and the way communication is, and from the higher ups all the way down to the children, something isn't connecting. And I just feel like I'm much more beneficial by removing myself from actually being an employee and putting myself in a position where I can be a vendor, I can be a consultant. So I'm not completely just dismissing the school, but not as an employee. So, and just to wrap it all up, as an instructional assistant, if I feel like I have a lot of paperwork and I feel like I gotta pay close attention to what's being asked of me, I could only imagine the pressure that's being put on some of the teachers that may feel as if when things are added to what it is they need to do, instead of it being accommodating, it adds more to their workload. So I'm grateful that this is happening because it sounds like the things that I'm not fond of are being discussed. But me personally, I've reached a point to where I'm not going back in the building as an employee.
Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate, given some of your earlier comments, that you felt that this was a safe space in which to say that. Okay. Is there anyone else? All right, well, then let's go back to Mike for the last slide on Battelle for Kids.
I think Mike stepped out
Robert?
way, so I'm going to cover this. But Dennis, if you could pull up slides. Thank you for staying late with us. I thought it was very valuable information today. We're exactly what Dante hit on is what we wanted to share. This is data that we can get sent to you, but if we design the most inventive space, as Carol was describing, that the building is interactive and drives learning, if the teachers aren't on board and the administration is not supporting the teachers to learn how to use the technology, how to teach creative thinking, how to teach critical thinking, then it needs to happen together. And so we know that like smaller classroom initiatives and student outcomes are happening, but we need them to continue to, we need to keep focused on the delivery of curriculum is the primary change that also needs to happen. So thank you so much, Dante, for speaking your truth. And then just a reminder as we move forward, we are meeting with curriculum, we are meeting with community partners, and those people will be part of our fall interactions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robin. So for our final point, thank you everyone, of course, for coming out tonight and presenting your thoughts and your ideas. All of this information, as has occurred with the other sessions, will be incorporated into a report of how this master plan will come together. This means that the comments from tonight, along with the comments from the other community discussions from the other 5 planning regions, will be reviewed at a facility planning committee meeting. This review process will then lead to future questions in upcoming surveys. Please join us on Wednesday, June 30th at 6 p.m. by tuning in virtually, as this meeting will be live streamed for the district Facebook and YouTube pages. Just as a reminder, if any of you would like to catch up on any of the previous phases of the or of the upcoming phase, please visit our Facilities Master Plan website at ccsoh.us/FMP. So again, thank you so much for taking time to share tonight. Look for a new survey for the defined phase in the upcoming weeks. We all look forward to our next community discussion to report on all the data that has been gathered over these first 3 phases. We feel that it is necessary to keep you as informed as possible before we start to create concepts of the master plan later in the fall of 2022. Your input is greatly appreciated. We really enjoyed your participation this evening. So now enjoy your summer. Try not to think about the master plan, and we'll see you in September. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.